Hello YouTube! So today I'm going to do a video that's much more for your viewing pleasure than it is for mine. And I'm going to do a video about some of the times where I've royally embarrassed myself here in France. Feel free to laugh at me, I'm totally fine with that. I've laughed at myself plenty of times since I've moved here. Obviously, as a foreigner, I've done all of the classics. I've said je suis chaud for I'm hot instead of j'ai chaud. And for those of you who speak French, you'll know that I was telling everyone about how excited I was feeling. You know, excited. But I think nothing can prepare you for how many times you're gonna embarrass yourself. A, when you're speaking a new language, and B, when you move to a new country. So without further ado, let's get rolling with the times where I've absolutely humiliated myself. Okay, so my first big embarrassment came when I started my first internship here in France. And I interned for LVMH, which is Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy Group. They're the French luxury giant who own Dior, Givenchy, Guerlain, Louis Vuitton, Marc Jacobs, all of these huge luxury brands. So as you can imagine, it was a super chic and quite uptight, formal environment. And so I arrived there for my first day, nervous as all hell, as you can imagine. This little girl from New Zealand to the luxury industry in Paris, France. And so I wanted to make a really good impression. So I arrived to my first day at work and I meet the intern who I'm replacing. And so I take note of her name, and for the rest of the day I'm introducing myself to people, these very chic, classy people, saying, "Hi, I'm Rosie, I'm from New Zealand and I'm replacing Miss Connard. Hello, nice to meet you. I'll be replacing Madame Connard." Connard, yes, Madame Connard. And so I spend the whole day explaining that I'm replacing this Miss Connard. And so at the end of the day, the person who I'm replacing has left the building, gone home for the night, and I need to send her an email about something. And so I double check with my, gorgeously chic French manager. I'm sorry, just to double check, I'm just needing to email Miss Connard. Is this how you spell it? C-O-N-N-A-R-D? And she looked at me and she was like, "Rosie, do you know what that means?" "No, I don't. I guess it's a surname, right?" She was like, "Firstly, that's not her surname. Her surname is Collard. And secondly, that means a-hole." So I had been going around on my first day introducing myself as the person who's going to replace the asshole. So that was an awesome start. The next time I embarrass myself is much less my fault, I think. My boyfriend was lovely enough to get me some beautiful leather boots for my birthdays, and I was absolutely in love with them. And I go to try them on and the foot fits, but I can't zip up the calf. Like, my calf muscles seem to be too established, I guess, for the zip to be able to make it up. So, oh well, it's a shame. Let's go shopping for some new ones and exchange them. So I went to Galeries Lafayette here in Paris, and I started picking up with the sales assistant several different pairs of boots to try, and not one of them would zip up. I never really had this problem before. I mean, I know that my legs are sort of shapelier, and in New Zealand the girls tend to have a bit more shapely, athletic kind of legs compared to the very slim legs you see here in France. But I didn't realize that it could be an issue, and so I'm trying to get these boots up, like trying to zip them up my calf muscles one by one. And the assistant, you can tell they're getting quite nervous, and they're like, "Ooh, ça va pas, ça va pas." They're trying to help, but there's not much that they can do. And I kept trying to point out boots that I liked the look of, and they'd look at me like. At the end of the day, I found a lovely brand from the UK with some gorgeous boots that fit me just fine. But that whole scenario was a little bit embarrassing with the panicked salesperson. And how do you say to someone like, "I'm sorry, but your legs are just too thick for our boots here." My next embarrassing story is again back when I was in LVMH, so again luxury industry, and my job was helping to organize these very prestigious kind of trainings for top executives. And so you'd invite very senior executives to a residential seminar, which means a seminar where you actually live there, sleep there, eat there, and do the training there. And we went to some beautiful locations because obviously it's a company that has a lot of money, so we would go to castles outside of Paris, and I'd be able to be there for a week, for example, and it was just incredible. And so my very first trip to one of these most beautiful castles outside of Paris, and for the after work drinks, they had these sort of nibbles out. So they had oysters and they had scallops and they had very nice things, but then on the end of the table they also had saucisson, which is this ride sausage that you can get in France, and you slice it into little slices, and you know it's got quite a lot of fat in it and everything, but it's super tasty. But because I'm not really a seafood fan, you know, I headed straight to the saucisson, and so I was cutting up chunks of saucisson, and I took some baguette and everything. And, you know, I went to join my manager and her sort of circle of very chic guests that we had invited to this training. I was there like, I love this saucisson. This is one of my favorite foods in France. And I could tell that that was really not the right thing to say. And afterwards she did tell me that saucisson is actually like not at all classy. All love it, it's very tasty, but no one would kind of ever admit that they really enjoyed it and it was very tasty, etc. in this kind of environment. So while they're there with their little toothpicks and their scallops, I'm there saying how much I'm loving that saucisson, and apparently I came across as really, really not classy. The next time I embarrassed myself was again at work, so I don't know what my colleagues think of me really, but I was running late this morning. I went down to the metro and it was the 1st of the month, which means that my metro pass had expired and I needed to top it up. I had no money on it, so I couldn't get to work. So I had to join a really long queue and wait and get it topped up and everything. So I ran into work and I joined this meeting like 5 minutes late. And because of my accent, I have a real trouble pronouncing the word queue in French. And so I was saying, je suis désolée, il y avait une énorme queue, un très très grand queue, and I was saying that, you know, this queue I was in was really long and that's why I was late. You're meant to sort of say queue like queue, I think. Even now I still struggle. And what I was saying was ass. So I was saying like queue. And so I was saying, I'm so sorry, there was a huge ass, a really, really long ass. I was stuck in the ass. And so they were obviously cracking up laughing because I was telling them that I was running late to work because I had been impeded by this giant ass. The next embarrassing moment that I want to share was very early on into my time in France. I really didn't speak a word of French, and so I was with my boyfriend and some of his friends whom I was meeting for the very first time, and I was eating an apple and we were chatting and I was eating my apple, and I asked my boyfriend, "Tu veux une bite?" Like, would you like a bite of my apple? And what I didn't realize at the time is that I was actually asking him if he would like a cock. Is it just me, by the way, or does like every single word in France have the potential to become a sexual connotation? Another time I had a little bit of a problem with the French language was when I was meeting a very, very senior director in my company, and I had actually just gotten back from New Zealand, and so I had bought back a range of chocolates from New Zealand that I was distributing to colleagues, and so I had a meeting with him and my manager, and I offered him a few chocolates from New Zealand. And he said, "You know what, it's so funny, I just had another New Zealander in the office and they too bought me a block of chocolate." I looked him in the eye and I said, "You know, we're very gourmand in New Zealand." And what I'm trying to say is we love sweet things and we very much get a lot of pleasure from food. But apparently saying, I'm very gourmand, or we're very gourmand, again has a very sexual connotation, and I was actually saying that I have a wide appetite but for something else. So he didn't really react in the moment, but when I told my boyfriend afterwards about the story, I told him, you know, I was explaining to this top director that we're very gourmand in New Zealand. He was like, what did you say exactly? And I repeated what I said, and he was like, you were basically asking him to pull his pants down in front of you. The next little embarrassment that I've had in France was really recently, actually, which just goes to show that learning French is going to take a very long time, because I still sometimes have difficulties picking up all of the sound. We were down in the south with my boyfriend's family, and they were telling us about their, you know, second cousin or something, and his name was Jambe Noire. And for me, Jambe Noire means black leg, because jambe is leg and noir is black. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this poor thing. And so I asked his family how he got the name Jambe Noire. Did he lose his leg somehow in battle? Did he have a disease in his leg which turned it black and he had to get it amputated? Like, that poor man, how did he get that name, Jambe Noire? And it turns out that his name was actually Jean Benoit, as in a hyphenated name, Jean Benoit. So those are just a few of my embarrassing stories that I have to tell. I've got a lot more where that came from, but I hope that that gave you guys a little bit of a laugh. I think it's fun to capture these kinds of things as expat in France. Like, there's no way you can navigate this country, navigate this language, without humiliating yourself at least 1,000 times. So I hope I'm not the only one out there. Tell me your funny stories down below when you've been in a new place, when you've learned a new language. I'd love to read them all. And until the next video, I'll say a bientôt!